The chamber was no longer a tomb, but a living mind. The great view screen, now revealed to be a window not into rock but into knowledge, dominated the far wall, its surface a cascade of shimmering, alien script flowing beside the majestic, slowly rotating star chart. Before the newly awakened console, Alara stood as a priestess before a new god, her reflection captured 1,000 times in the glowing symbols that danced across the obsidian-like surface. The air itself hummed with a quiet, potent energy, a thrum of power that had slept for uncounted ages. Kalen remained a step behind, a sentinel of tempered steel in a sanctuary of light and glass. He held the Sunreaver at a low ready, its metallic form feeling brutishly simple against the elegant complexity of the room. He did not trust this place. He respected its power, feared it even, but trust was a currency earned through reliability, not overwhelming awe. This silent, thinking machine had already tried to kill them once. Incredible! Alara breathed, her voice a hushed whisper that barely disturbed the sanctum's quiet hum. She reached out, her fingers hovering a mere inch above the console, afraid to break the spell. It's not just a map, Kalen. It's a library. An atlas. A lexicon of the cosmos. Every glyph, every stream of light, it's a word, a sentence, a paragraph in a language of stars. And it's a language we can't read, Kalen stated flatly, his pragmatism a bucket of cold water on her scholarly fire. What good is a library of scrolls you can't decipher? All I see are targets and threats we can't possibly comprehend. His gaze drifted to the great thrones. They seemed less like seats of power now and more like silent, brooding judges, their vacant forms a testament to the beings who had once commanded this nexus. He felt like an ant that had stumbled into a giant's workshop, surrounded by tools whose purpose he could only guess at, any one of which could crush him without a thought. Alara paid his caution no mind, her attention wholly captivated. That's where you're wrong, she said, her voice quickening with excitement. Language is pattern. Syntax. Repetition. The ancients who built this, for all their power, must have followed the same fundamental laws of logic. If I can find the pattern... She finally surrendered to temptation, her slender finger gently touching a large, circular glyph that pulsed with a steady blue light. On the massive view screen, the galactic map instantly shifted, a section of the starfield expanding to fill the display. A web of faint, golden lines appeared, connecting various stars within the cluster like a spider's web of shimmering thread. See? She gasped. A direct, one-to-one interaction. This glyph is a command. A function. Perhaps. Focus or examine dot. She touched another symbol, a complex lattice of intersecting triangles. The golden lines vanished, and the map zoomed out again. And that, perhaps, is return or reset dot. She was like a child with a new toy, her earlier exhaustion completely forgotten, replaced by a feverish, intellectual hunger. For the next hour, she worked in silence, a portrait of intense concentration. Tentatively at first, then with growing confidence, her fingers danced across the console. She would touch a glyph, observe the reaction on the great screen, murmur a hypothesis to herself, and then try another. Kalen watched her, a strange mix of apprehension and admiration stirring within him. He did not understand what she was doing, not in the way she did, but he understood the focus of a master at their craft. It was the same look a swordsman had when studying an opponent's stance, the same intensity a general had poring over a battlefield map. He used the time for a more practical survey. He checked their supplies. 6 vials of the strange, viscous healing fluid. The new white cylinder, the Wand of Wellness, which he now suspected drew its power from the ambient energy of the keep itself. The Orb of True Sight. His Sunreaver was fully charged with the new obsidian block, but the previous one was a dead weight in his satchel, a reminder that this power was finite. And their food and water? Nearly gone. Alara, he said, his voice cutting through her concentration. She flinched, startled. What is it? We've been down here for what feels like a full day. Our water skins are nearly empty, and the last of the salted meat is gone. This place may be timeless, but we are not. We need a plan that involves more than just poking at glowing lights. She turned to him, a flicker of annoyance in her gray eyes, the mundane interruption dragging her back from the precipice of discovery. But she saw the grim reality in his expression. She sighed, a puff of air that seemed to wilt her enthusiasm. You're right, of course, she conceded, rubbing her temples. My apologies. A scholar's mind can be a poorly tended garden, all too easily overgrown with a single fascinating specimen. She looked back at the console, a thoughtful frown on her face. The problem is the sheer volume of information. It's like trying to learn a language by reading every book in a library at once. I need a primer. A starting point. Something fundamental. Her eyes scanned the console, no longer seeking grand functions but searching for something basic, a root from which the rest of the language could grow. Her gaze fell upon a small, isolated cluster of 3 simple glyphs she had previously ignored. They were not complex like the others, but were basic geometric shapes, a single vertical line, a perfect circle, and a solid triangle. They glowed with a faint, steady white light, inviting interaction. Perhaps, she mused, thinking aloud, every complex structure is built from simple forms. Every grand spell from basic runes. What if this isn't a command but a lesson? She reached out and touched the vertical line. The great view screen instantly went blank, the star chart and flowing script vanishing. They were plunged into near darkness, illuminated only by the soft glow of the console itself. Before Alara could recoil in panic, a single, identical vertical line of brilliant white light appeared in the center of the vast screen. A moment later, one of the alien glyphs they had seen before, the one she had theorized meant focus, flashed beside it, then faded. Kaelin tensed. What did you do? I think, Alara said, her voice trembling with excitement. I've just found the alphabet. She touched the circle on the console. The line on the screen vanished, replaced by a glowing circle. The same focus glyph flashed again. She then touched the triangle, and the same thing happened. It was a calibration sequence. A teaching tool, using universal symbols to define its own complex language. It's a diagnostic, she declared, her face alight with triumph. It's establishing a common ground, teaching its operator the most basic commands through association. Line means line. Circle means circle. It's brilliant in its simplicity. For the next several minutes, she followed the sequence. The console would display a shape, she would touch the corresponding shape on her panel, and the view screen would confirm the action by flashing a new, more complex glyph. A glyph for select. A glyph for confirm. A glyph for query. She was not just pressing buttons, she was learning to speak. After the sequence completed, the star chart returned to the view screen, but now it was different. Certain glyphs on the console were glowing more brightly, the functions the system had just taught her. She now possessed a rudimentary understanding. She had the key words to form a question. Now, she said, her voice steady and determined, let's find out where we are. Her fingers moved with newfound purpose. She selected the glyph for query, then a series of others that she surmised formed a command string. She was looking for a specific stellar signature, a pattern she knew not from ancient texts, but from the clear night skies of her own world. A single, familiar yellow star. Soul, as the elves called it. The heart of their own system. She completed the command string and pressed the glyph for confirm. The celestial map began to move. Stars and nebulae flew past on the view screen in a silent, breathtaking rush. It was as if they were soaring through the void on an impossible steed. Galaxies swirled and condensed, clusters of light resolved into individual suns, and then, the frantic pace slowed. The maps centered on a system that was utterly, achingly familiar. A single yellow star, orbited by its family of planets, a small, scorched rock, two vibrant jewels of blue-green and ochre, a massive gas giant with its telltale rings. Home! Kalen whispered, the single word full of a weight he hadn't known he was carrying. All this alien grandeur, this cosmic scale, and yet there, on the screen, was the world he fought for. Illyria. A tiny, fragile sphere of blue and white in an infinite, black ocean. For the first time, the sheer, terrifying isolation of their world became a palpable thing. They were not the center of the universe. They were a forgotten outpost, a single grain of sand on a shore that stretched for eternity. Elara's work wasn't done. Using the newly learned commands, she began to overlay information onto the display. Streams of the ancients' data flowed around the image of their solar system. Most of it was still gibberish, but some symbols were now recognizable from the diagnostic. She identified labels for planetary mass, orbital velocity, atmospheric composition. They cataloged everything, she murmured in awe. Every rock, every wisp of gas. They knew our world more intimately than we do. They saw it not as a realm of gods and monsters, but as a collection of elements and equations. Kalen pointed to their planet. Can you zoom in? Can we see the continent? Elara shook her head. I don't think this is a scrying mirror. It's a map, a navigational tool. Its focus is on the macro, the celestial. To it, our kingdoms are less than dust. As she spoke, her eyes caught something else. A single glyph, pulsing slowly near the representation of their planet. It was a deep, angry crimson, a color they had not seen in any of the system's normal operations. It flashed with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a warning beacon. A discordant note in the harmonious symphony of data. A drop of blood in a pristine pool. What is that? Kalen asked, his voice sharp. The knight in him immediately recognized a symbol for danger. Elara's brow furrowed. She manipulated the console, trying to query the ominous red symbol. A new window of text and diagrams appeared on the view screen, dominated by the pulsing crimson glyph. She couldn't read the words, but the intent was clear. The diagrams showed their planet, Illyria, and a trajectory line originating from the dark, empty space beyond the system's edge. The line was aimed directly at them. It's a warning, she said, her voice losing its academic calm and taking on a chilling edge. An alert. Something is being tracked. Tracked? Kalen stepped closer, his knuckles white on the grip of his Sunreaver. Tracked by whom? What is it? Elara worked frantically at the console, her hands flying across the glowing surface, trying to coax more meaning from the alien machine. I don't know. The system is old, the data stream is labeled as ancient. It's not a recent warning. Her fingers froze. No. Wait, that's not right. The alert timestamp is cyclical. It's not one event. It's a pattern. A patrol. Suddenly, the red glyph on the screen flashed brighter. A low, somber chime echoed through the chamber, a sound that vibrated with deep, resonant finality. It was the sound of an alarm, triggered after millennia of silence. On the tactical display, the trajectory line, once a mere representation, began to flash. At its origin point, far out in the blackness of the void, a new symbol appeared. It was the same angular, aggressive shape as the juggernaut that had guarded the entrance. Elara looked up from the console, her face pale, her gray eyes wide with dawning horror. It's not a patrol, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the solemn, chiming alarm. It's a failsafe. A planetary quarantine protocol. And by activating this room, we've just signaled that the quarantine has been breached. Kalen stared at the hostile symbol moving inexorably toward their home on the star chart. What does that mean? It means, Elara said, the weight of 1,000 forgotten years in her voice, that something is coming for us. And it has been coming for a very, Very long time.